From Vassar College, this is Conversations at the Salt Line with Wesley Dixon. On this episode, a conversation with Stacy London.
Hi everyone, it's me, Wes, and welcome to Conversations at the Salt Line. Today I am here with our guest, Vassar alum, class of 91, Stacy London, former co-host of TLC's What Not to Wear, and now CEO of her own company, The State of Menopause. Thank you so much for being here, Stacy.
Thank you so much for having me. God, alumni 91, right?
I know.
I'm ancient.
I know. We're talking about aging somewhat today, right?
I know,
so it's a good thing.
exactly.
We're dating ourselves in the most positive of ways,
Absolutely.
right?
I would never have it any other way.
I'm so happy to hear that. You know, I wasn't even born in 91 yet.
Oh my God.
I know. I'm just adding insult to injury.
Adding insult to injury. It's really not. I'm fascinated by meeting younger people all the time. I think I'm also fascinated by older generations, but you know, I feel like I was always the youngest person in the room, and now I'm always the oldest.
Yes.
And it is a very weird pivot in a funny kind of way. But I try, and I think maybe this has been my philosophy since I was at Vassar, to be as open and curious as possible. So when it comes to people of different ages, different creeds, different upbringings, anything, it's not so much like, how are you the same as me? I always want to know, what can I learn that's different?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. Well, I'm happy that you're here. Happy we're going to have a conversation today. And feel free to ask me any questions you want to ask me too, because I'm an open book as well.
Cool.
So we'll go back and forth.
Okay.
I have to say, for those listening and for those who are watching, that I got the best compliment today from Miss Stacy London, which was that she loves what I have on. She could be being very nice and could be being a little bit, gratuitous in her compliment, but
No,
it meant
that's
a
not
lot
me.
to me. So I will take it for what it's worth.
Well, I appreciate that, and also I never tell anybody they look good if they don't.
Well,
I mean,
thank you.
brutal honesty is sort of my reputation, but you are mixing patterns and using some bright color. I mean, I couldn't be happier.
Thank you. I am a Florida boy, so I really have to bring out
where
some
in
warmth.
Florida?
Fort Lauderdale, Broward County,
All
baby.
right,
I am
all right.
from I shouldn't say it on here, but I am from what I think is the best part of Florida, South Florida in particular, which I think should be a different state from the rest of Florida. But that's a different conversation for a different day.
I know, listen, I wish Texas was its own country. I don't know who I'm offending by that, but
Yes.
there you go.
Wonderful. And where did you grow up, by the way?
I grew up in Manhattan.
Oh, wow.
I was born and bred. I was actually born in a hospital that not only date myself again, but is no longer in existence.
Oh, my goodness.
But very funny story. One of my closest friends who I met at Vassar, turns out we went to different schools in Manhattan, but we were born a day apart, delivered by the same doctor in the same hospital.
Wow.
So, I mean,
And how did you all figure that out?
I have no idea. When I think about it, I know we figured it out in the library.
Okay.
It's my friend Hillary Guberman. Hi, Hill, if you're listening. And I don't remember how we figured it out, but we were like, Dr. Seidman, Doctor's Hospital. And, her last name was G and my last name was L. And we must have been in the same baby room together.
Oh, my goodness. That is just so, I love that.
The nursery, yeah.
Talk about serendipity, even from childhood, right?
Even from childhood. But yeah, for me, it was a real experience to grow up in New York.
I'm sure.
I remember my dad used to tell me, you're so sheltered. You have absolutely no idea what the rest of the world is like. And at the time, I was like, how could you say that? We have the best museums and
Things
art
like
galleries
clothes,
and
right.
clothes and fashion and, all of these things and our botanical gardens, like anything, our aquarium.
The zoo.
And he was like, you don't know about the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And it took me a really long time to understand, because even growing up in New York, I was very blessed to, grow up with privilege and in a place that really did allow me to kind of feed my intellect from a very early age and feed my curiosity, what we were talking about. But it's very different than growing up in different parts of this country or around the world. And, we say that New York is the center, but in some ways it's a bubble, and it doesn't allow for the kind of understanding and perhaps the kind of relating that you do to other people.
It's true.
You know,
I make fun of my friends from New York all the time, and they take it now because they know I'm telling the truth. But like, I went to Birmingham a few months ago to visit some friends who are from and live in Birmingham, and one of my friends who grew up in New York, is from Harlem, was like, "Oh, like, where do you fly into? Like, I'm like, Birmingham is a really big
It's a
city.
big city.
Like, there's an airport in Birmingham.
Yes,
I'm not flying
yes.
into a cornfield. But, you know, it was a funny thing. And he understands that it's ridiculous, but it's true, right? That as a child of New York, he really, truly, I think of his own volition at some point. He's now in his 30s, so he definitely could learn about the rest of the country. But I
Right.
think just by nature of growing up there, he just doesn't really, know so much about what it's like to live in a different place in this country and what that actually means in terms of how people think, how they experience life, how they walk through the world. So he's not a bad person. He just, he's a New Yorker.
Of course, but if nothing else, I would say probably in terms of my own personal edification and education, the last 5 years have been extraordinary in this country. The things that we're talking about, what youth is doing, even what COVID kind of brought to the surface in terms of necessary social change.
Right.
When we talk about gender or sexuality or race, the systemic dismantling of these, sort of I guess isms, right, is so fascinating to me and really did remind me that, we all, especially, I was thinking about this in terms of being in New York. We think of New York as the center of the world, but in some ways it's just not connected to a lot of the world. Right. And it's very easy to, put blinders on and forget what's happening, around us. But it's something that I think, perhaps the positive side of social media and the digital age is our ability to connect in a way that was never possible before.
Absolutely.
There's lots of downsides to it as well, but for me, it's really been kind of an unbelievable journey when I think about sort of the way lives are no longer linear. When I was growing up, before you were born, it was like you went to school and, if you were very lucky or privileged or a very hard worker, you got to go to college, right? And from college you went and you got a job, and then maybe you got a better job, and then maybe you met your significant other, and then maybe you had some kids, and then maybe you got the corner office, and then you bought the country house, then you retire and you move to Florida and you die. And we don't live like that anymore.
No.
We don't have linear lives. We don't eat the same way. We don't date the same way. We don't work the same way. And for me, I feel like as a Gen Xer, I've had one foot in the Industrial Revolution and what, the family unit looked like and what you would talk to people about and what you kept hidden and all of that kind of idea of, post World War II. And the digital age, which, is sort of like, thank God I'm flexible because it's a real split.
Oh, but yeah.
And I still consider myself kind of a Luddite. Like I feel so completely confused when I have to ask my girlfriend, like, how do I take a picture from this screen on my computer? But I also feel like I've gotten to live through so many incredible moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Talking about the digital age, I'm so curious, particularly thinking about your experience in whatnot to wear and other just sort of like media and other sorts of avenues like that. I'm so curious your reflection on like how you and your peers and colleagues or regular people think about like fashion in particular, given the advent of like social media sharing, us seeing everything so instantaneously, the criticism that comes with that, of course, in the comments in ways that weren't just sort of singular from a host, but now are democratized, if you will. So
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I do think that the digital age has brought with it a new kind of democratization to the entire fashion industry, which was clearly needed.
Yeah.
And, when I started in magazines, my first job after Vassar was at Vogue, because I just wanted to keep the V's going.
Of course.
And, at that time, print was queen, right? There was nothing better than being at Vogue, American Vogue. I lucked out. But at the same time, I realized that what attracted me to fashion in the first place was deep insecurity. I wanted to be beautiful and cool and in the know. And it was only by working at magazines that you knew what was happening 6 months before it ever showed up in a store, right? So to go from that, I remember when I left magazines, I got fired, which, again, I say this, with the full knowledge that not everybody is able to do it, but I really appreciated getting fired.
Right. But why did you get fired?
I got fired because a new editor-in-chief came in. I was the senior fashion editor at Mademoiselle magazine by that time, and it was like, baby Vogue for young girls, younger women, and a new editor-in-chief came in, and she fired a bunch of us, right? She wanted a fresh start. And sadly because of her, the magazine was closed, but
Right.
whatever.
Right.
I'm not bitter.
Yeah.
But it was funny. I got fired at 30 and I spent a year, styling real people for commercials, not the models that I
Right.
had been styling for magazines, people who look like me and you. And
Right.
I was dressing a lot of men. I was dressing kids. I was dressing real bodies
Yeah.
for bank commercials, for juice
Right.
commercials, things like that, which I really think is what set me up to get the job at What Not to Wear,
Right.
because we weren't taught, it was great that I'd done editorial. It was great that I'd styled celebrity covers. Of course, that always is like a nice
It's a
thing to be able
cachet.
yeah, it's a little bit of cachet. But I think the real thing was being able to dress real people for real life,
Yeah.
not just a red carpet. And I remember at that time, people said to me, oh, so sorry you didn't make it in magazines.
Oh, really? They felt bad for
TV,
you?
Everybody was like, ooh, that's just a step down. And I am getting to your question.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, to answering your question. But for me, at that time, 5 years after I started What Not to Wear, everybody wanted that job. Anybody who'd been in print could see the writing on the wall.
Right.
Television had sort of taken over that space. And because style is such a visual medium, transformation is very powerful when you
Right.
see it in action. And I think that was part of the success of the show. But I do think, the show stopped running in 2013. And I do think if you look at sort of the advent of social media, Twitter, 2008 is when I joined. I don't even know when
Yeah.
it started, right? I didn't even get to Instagram till like 2012. I mean, Facebook I was on
Right.
early. But those things, when I think about that, I remember agents telling me that they were signing bloggers, and I was like, "What is a
What is
blogger?
that? Like,
who cares
how are they
about
making
bloggers?
their money?"
Exactly. Well, how do you monetize this?"
Right.
And then, from bloggers, we got influencers. And
Right.
what's interesting is that television is no longer queen.
No.
It is absolutely, streamers and social and YouTube channels and basically anybody who owns their own channels or omni-channel is their own brand.
Right.
And what I find so interesting about that is that we went from what I consider to be a how-to generation in 2002 when unscripted was just, being born into the world. People were looking for ways to kind of figure out what they wanted to do with their style or with their interior design.
Right.
We were on what TLC was called the Learning Channel.
Right.
I do sometimes refer to it as totally lame Caucasians, but that's just just between you, me, and whoever is listening.
Yeah, exactly.
But the funny thing about that is that we were we were teaching you how to dress
Right.
or how to change the paint color in your rooms.
How to live
Trading
your best
spaces,
life.
right? Trading spaces was so big then. But over the years, I think what happened and what social media did in terms of democratization was to create what I call Me Too instead of How To. And I don't mean that in the sort of more serious sense of the hashtag.
Right.
That is something I don't want to take away from it all. But the idea that we no longer look to experts.
Right.
We are interested not in expertise, but in collective experience. And for me, that's watching young people who dress in the most incredible, imaginative ways, create a following because they feel that they are, whatever they're expressing about themselves is being seen and felt by a huge community.
Exactly.
Because they're like, I see you. I relate to that. I relate to that visual language.
Right.
You're part of my tribe. You're part of my group. And that's very different from having an expert who's quote unquote got 10,000 hours of experience.
Right.
I got 10,000 years worth
Right.
of experience at this point, telling you what to do, right?
Right.
There's a new sense of freedom and individuality that when I think back to some of What Not to Wear, I think, oh, we didn't let a lot of free spirits just be free spirits, right? We were meant to be an entertaining show. We were meant to be snarky, of
Right.
course. But when I really look back, I think what we were trying to do, was instill confidence, self-esteem, being able to have people see themselves in a new light, in a new way.
Right.
But it was never about the clothes, right?
Right.
It was about what the clothes could do.
Right,
It was
to the
about
person.
not just self-expression, but self-esteem, self-acceptance, all of these things. And yes, I cringe because I think, wow, we were really out of line in some of the things that we said. I mean, there are young people I know who go back to clips from What Not to Wear and tear us to shreds.
Of course.
Of course, like it was a different time and and really a different generation of media,
Right.
not just a different generation of people.
Right.
And so for me, if I was ever to do a show like that again, I think it would have to be much grander in scale.
Right.
We start with clothes, but really it's what's keeping you from your best life.
Yeah.
Our way in was fashion,
Right.
but Clinton and I deserve honorary degrees in psychology.
Yeah, of course.
That's what this is about.
Right. I love that. I want to harken back to something you said earlier about sort of your start in the industry being insecurity and wanting to sort of
Yes.
know what was going to be in vogue, no pun intended, before it was in vogue. It's funny because given what we just talked about, I'm curious to know, we see things sort of now as this shared experience. It's a democratized sort of way of what's in vogue and what's in fashion or whatever. So I'm curious if you still have this insecurity of wanting to feel like you are sort of at the know before things happen, or if you sort of reconcile
less so. Yeah. I mean, I
Okay.
got to say, it's a great question. Less so,
Okay.
right? I think, all of us come into the world with our insecurities, and certainly, we get beat up by the world. We get beat up. That's part of being alive. But no, the 16-year-old in me who, grew up with a skin disease from the time that I was 3, had very, very, very deep scars, physical and psychological, around this idea of not being beautiful and wanting, the kind of praise that I saw, fashion editors and models and photographers all kind of getting, and really also being in the center of that kind of creativity.
Yeah.
That's the real in.
Yeah.
When you see people who are so passionate and so creative, that to me feels like you're in the middle of incredible energy. And I wanted to be a part of all of that, as well as kind of thinking that, being in fashion would make me feel, I hate to use the word superior, but this idea of knowing things before other people got to know them was a big part of it. But I think more importantly was that I got into fashion only to realize that fashion is fed on insecurity.
Of course.
And that is how the industry makes money. And when I think about what we were doing on What Not to Wear, we came at it from the inverse. We were like, what does your personal style say about you? Is it saying what you want it to say about you? Is it helping you get ahead in where you want to be in life? If you, now I say things like, look, I am not here to be the fashion expert or style expert or whatever to tell you what to do. I mean, I have a company to run. But aside from that, my feeling is, are you getting what you want from your style? So I always use the example of a suit. If you want to work for a very conservative, old school heritage bank, wear the pinstripe suit to the interview if you want to be taken seriously for that position. But, if you're auditioning to be a dominatrix, wear the latex cat suit. You know, I mean, it's whatever works for the situation in which you find yourself. And that's really on you to navigate, right?
Yeah.
I don't make the rules. We have a 3-second brain. We have a 3-second lag time in our brain that allows us to make a judgment. That creates fight, flight, or fear, or freeze. That's our lizard brain working. But the way that I think presents in modern day society is we make a judgment about what we see. And are you one of my people? Are you not? Should I not like you? Should I be afraid of you? It's a little less woolly mammoth, saber-toothed tiger lizard brain, but we are reacting in that 3-second time period to what we see in front of us.
Absolutely.
And so I like the idea of you controlling your own narrative.
And
I didn't make up the game, but I want you to win.
In it,
I just want you to win.
I love it. Yeah. I have a really good friend actually who just started a new job at TikTok, of all places, and he works in the trust and safety division, sort of looking at minors' safety. Of course, it's a huge, I would say, liability. Of course, the platform is very powerful. It gives young people in particular lots of ability to both consume and create all different kinds of content.
I wish I knew how to create that kind of content.
I am sure you do.
I really do.
You have some reels on Instagram, don't you?
I do. I have some reels,
yeah,
but
similar.
But TikTok with the voices and being able to use dialogue from I'm like, where is the young person to teach me how to do this?
All over this campus.
We
can find you one.
Exactly.
We actually have a student who is a TikTok influencer and actually has millions of followers.
Oh my God.
We will find her.
I want to understand.
Yes.
I want to understand because I agree with you. Very powerful. Didn't mean,
No,
sorry,
go ahead.
interrupted.
No, go ahead.
But I think that it's so interesting that your friend has this job.
Yes.
Because when we talk about, right, like what goes viral and what doesn't, I mean, some of these challenges where we're seeing kids either injure themselves or worse, killed.
Yeah, certainly.
That's an incredible amount of power for any social media company to wield.
Absolutely.
And I remember when I first saw TikTok, if I'm really being honest, I went sort of down that rabbit hole,
right,
watching like families dressed in matching pajamas, singing their hearts out. And I'm, somebody throwing eggs at someone's house and somebody doing some sort of like Running Man dance in the middle of the street. And I'm like, this is what our country has become. That made me a little nervous.
Right.
But I do think for all the things that you were just saying, there is a dark side to social. There is a dark side to everybody thinking they're a celebrity. There is a dark side to being compare and despair, on social.
Well, and this is what I'm getting at. I mean, so it's funny because we give people so much power to empower themselves in the way they look, the way they present themselves, all these kinds of things, right? But then I have to think about things like Facetune and filters, all these different kinds of things that are on these platforms, right? And in some ways, for me, it's sad because we're really sort of like creating less optionality for folks to sort of be themselves, to look unique, to be different, to be individualistic, right? We're sort of all saying, hey, like, let's all contour your face artificially with whatever filter, right, to look the very same, right? And so it's sad because, for me at least, because in the era in which people can really promote their own sense of individuality and not have to go to experts, but rather be their own expert, we also given them tools to sort of become assimilated, right? And sort of fake it in ways that are just like, at least not what I would want.
No, and I completely agree with you. But again, I feel like this is part of, there's always going to be pros and cons when we're talking about this kind of leap in technology and this kind of, I remember meeting with a VC at one point in my career who said to me, Facebook is nothing. It is a tsunami that is going to change the world forever.
Right.
And so for me, I worry more about young people and being more impressionable than somebody my age. But that's not to say I am absolutely sometimes a victim of feeling like, why wasn't I invited to that party? Why don't I look? That woman is 53. God, I wish I looked like her. That happens.
Right.
But the idea that we are, anything that we are putting on social media does not have complete authenticity, even when we try.
Right.
I think that I, in my career, have become more and more transparent with my own struggles. Certainly with my entire career, mental health issues, things like that, because I feel like younger people have given me permission to do that. And it's one of the things I love most about younger people is that there is this kind of multi-generational, cyclical movement where, I may be able to help somebody who's young who doesn't know what to do with their first heartbreak.
Right.
But that same person has something to offer me as well. And I think we've always said, respect your elders, look to older generations to see how you're meant to do things. And now I think it's the opposite. I think Gen Xers, me in particular, my generation, I think we are the last generation. We're the first generation to really start breaking down some barriers that I think older generations have not. But we are the last generation that is going to experience the kind of internalized shame that I think, we have inherited from older generations.
Yep.
I do not see that kind of shame to the same degree in younger people. I see this willingness to be transparent and expressive, to find the people who you can relate to, right?
Absolutely.
And this is, again, the connection in that sense when it comes to social media, to me, is remarkable. The problem is that, Shelley Turkle wrote that book Alone Together, and the idea that we are, we have cervical spine issues because we're always looking at our phone, right? Like, are we missing deeper connections? And how manipulated are the connections that we're making on social? So to your point, this idea, like, I'm always like, look, use filters if you want to. I don't care. What do I care, right? I don't know how to use them, so I'm not going to. But the bigger issue for me is that it doesn't matter if you're using the filter. If you took 500 selfies to choose one to post, right? That's still not authenticity.
Of course.
And that concerns me because it worries me for younger people that what authenticity means is going to mean something different, right? And the one thing that you don't want to have happen, I always want there to be an extension in terms of language, right? When I think about what's happening in the trans movement, right? There are so many people that I talk to who tell me that they see the trans movement as a young movement, young people speaking out, speaking their truth, speaking to their identity. But the other group is people in their 50s and 60s who said, I never had language for who I am.
This is empowering me to be myself.
Exactly.
In whatever wave of life I'm in. Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, authenticity is not necessarily about posting a picture of yourself on Instagram, but speaking your truth.
Yeah.
That is something that's very different. And you may be doing that, visually
in a whole host of
social,
ways.
Right, exactly, in a whole host of ways. But what I love is the idea that we are expanding our minds and expanding our actual language, both visually and actually, in terms of what it means to be I don't like the word inclusive. I would say diverse.
Okay.
Right? And the reason that I don't love inclusive,
I was going to ask you,
right,
obviously,
is that it presupposes there was something to be included in. And that's exactly the systems that we should be trying to break down.
Right.
So I like diversity, and I like labels only when people want to give them to themselves. I do not want to be the person labeling somebody else. I don't want to be labeled by somebody else.
Right.
But this expansion of language, when I look at sort of LGBTQIAP+, right, I'm like, that's amazing.
Right.
Even when, I feel sometimes undereducated, and I'll ask, like, what does intersex mean versus what does pansexual mean, or things like that. When I think about the real issues of, let's say, something like race in this country, right? And I see how much ignorance there is around that particular issue, where there is almost no reason whatsoever for it. Like the fact that this is 400 years of having voices not heard, and even longer, obviously, for other countries. But for me, that's inexcusable.
Yeah.
What happened during COVID, and watching what happened with Black Lives Matter, even Black Trans Lives Matter, was a huge, huge cause in the city during COVID.
Right.
And to see those things come to life in a way that is with purpose and with power, and not anger, not. I think about how righteous so many people can be about so many different topics instead of open. And one of the things that I saw a lot really before COVID and during COVID was cancel culture. A lot of white women, I think, really experienced it in a very visceral way. And there was so much to dig into. There was so much to learn.
Right.
And to me, I saw it as a great opportunity.
Right.
I don't believe in cancel culture, just to be clear. I truly believe in cancel culture. But you can't cancel people who aren't listening or who don't want to
engage,
learn. Right. But for me, again, these are movements fueled by youth.
Right.
And instead of being that, these young whippersnappers, like my grandfather was, I want to understand.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm always going to agree or have the really completely, I can sympathize, not necessarily empathize with every experience.
Right.
But for me, I am so curious about how the world is changing, how your brain is different from mine, just from the time that you were born and being sort of, digitally native, right? I heard a stat that since the real advent of social media, in one 24-hour news cycle, we see more images than my grandparents saw in their lifetime.
Oh my God, that's so scary.
Isn't that terrifying?
It's so horrifying.
So our brains obviously are developing differently. Right. And instead of being like, I don't understand young people, right, and you kind of silo yourself, for me, it's so important. It's so important to kind of really understand what what matters to youth, what matters to them in a way that didn't matter to us. I hear from young people all the time, they are less interested in owning their first home than they are in saving the planet.
Absolutely.
And so, I really think about the values that we are brought up with, not just within our own families, but within our own generations, within our own locations, all of those things. We can't know another person's experience, right?
Yeah.
Even when we say, yes, if you walk a mile in somebody's shoes, well, that it's almost
not
possible,
right?
I mean, it really isn't. And in that regard, I think, the greatest thing and the greatest part of my lives and careers, because I've had certainly quite a few, has been being open to what's new.
Yeah.
And not holding on to what was.
Yeah.
I feel most strongly about that. I think in what has always been my greatest interest is the concept of self. In fact, it's what I wrote my thesis on at Vassar.
Really?
Yes,
Here at Tell us more about that.
Well, I was an independent major.
Okay.
And it was on German philosophy and literature, 20th century, mostly Nietzsche and Heidegger, Hermann Broch and Hermann Hesse.
Okay.
About the concept of self as a character. And what it meant for kind of German existentialism,
right.
Which, believe me, I don't think really I didn't think was really going to pay off. It was just my interest.
Right.
And my father, having been an academic, said to me, study what you love. Right. Don't worry in undergrad about what you're going to need to do with your life.
A very progressive father you had.
Very conservative in some ways, but when it came to education, he founded a college at NYU called Gallatin, which was only one, central course, and then everything else was elective. You choose what you want to study. And so when I came to Vassar, I had that in my head about wanting to understand, even in high school, having been so interested in the French existentialists, and I thought, they just really copied the Germans. The Germans are way darker. And for me, it was just something that really interested me. Philosophy really made me think. Psychology, I studied a lot of as well, really made me think. Who knew what kind of application that was going to have in my life? But I'll tell you, it's remarkable. And I remember my father saying to me, you don't go to college because you're studying philosophy or biology or, cultural studies or women's studies. You go to learn things, sure, but you want to be able to read extensively, you want to be able to write well, and you want to be able to think critically. And if you have those three skills when you leave college, you've got the world in front of you.
Absolutely. I love that. So I am curious. So you made a big life transition.
Yes.
In my mind, for what it's worth, right? And you started a new company. You sort of moved away from fashion as we knew it before.
Yes.
And you started a new company, State of Menopause, which I understand is celebrating a birthday today.
Yes.
So happy 1 year birthday. You're so exciting.
I am. It's like my baby is 1 year old.
I love that.
1 year old. I always say 1 year old. I was saying that before, and I was like, what is wrong with me? That's age and brain fog.
You said it, not me.
Yeah, no, I take that.
You'll take that?
Yeah.
But I understand just from reading about sort of the foundation of the business that it really did start for you as a thing of self, right? Yourself as a character changed,
yes.
right? And that sort of motivated you to find new purpose in life, new interest in life, new ways to spend your time, and that resulted in this business. So tell us about that.
Look, I think it was a combination of things. I would like to think that I'm both a fantasist and a realist. And, at around 45, 46, I had already finished What Not to Wear. I did another show on TLC called Love Loves to Run. I had been with Today Show for 5 years. I'd done a lot with Oprah and Access Hollywood and Rachel Ray. I'd, been a spokesperson for Pantene and Dr. Scholl's and Woolite and Lee Jeans. And I had had a very public career for a very long time. And I had really started to notice that something in me wasn't feeling right. And, I originally thought, this is cultural. I am now entering my late 40s and I'm sort of being cast aside as, I'm not the flavor of the month. I'm not 22. I wasn't, I started in television at 32, so I was never 22 in television. But, I started to feel like the winds were shifting, and they were shifting because television, and certainly transformational television, was really kind of falling off the map. Now, Queer Eye, I put in its own category, but on network television or,
Yeah.
even just premium cable, you weren't seeing the same kinds of shows
Right.
because that whole kind of how-to genre was disappearing.
Yep.
And I certainly didn't feel that I wanted to go on doing Instagram reels being like, this is how you put an outfit together.
Right.
I'd been doing that for 20 years. For me, that held no interest. And
Right.
I really started to panic because I was like, this is my area of expertise.
Right.
I don't want to do transformation shows, but I know television. And
Right.
what is it that I want to do? Well, I need to do something around things that aren't being called attention to. And clearly, there's something about middle age, especially when it comes with women and those who identify as such,
Right.
that is a real turning point.
Yeah.
And so that's how it started for me, right? The sense of cultural irrelevancy, sort of having been at the center of pop culture for, or at least a good meme
Right.
for a long time. That was the beginning of it. And then I went out in 2019. I just wrote an article for O Magazine about this, that I went out in 2019 to pitch a show about midlife transformation,
Okay.
about what it meant for me in my 40s to have had so a very bad breakup. I had spine surgery. I lost my father. These were things that really, sort of created this sense of isolation and feeling like a whole. I guess I'm struggling for words because it was a little bit like grief.
Yeah.
It was having to say goodbye to who I was
Right.
and not knowing
Who you were going to become.
who I was going to become, or even who I was in the moment,
Right.
right? And so I went out to pitch this show. And my whole concept was, let's talk midlife transformation. Let's talk about this for women in particular,
Right.
because there are so many other things going on that men don't, and not to gender this entire conversation, but men don't really experience in the
Right,
same
of
way,
course.
right? I don't see George Clooney hurting because he's 60, right?
Right.
So I mean it in that regard, and certainly in terms of forward facing and what it means to be public facing
Right.
and in the media and sort of the expectations that are placed on women. So I wanted to go to talk about midlife transformation, right? When we talk about a midlife crisis, what would it look like to take a crisis and turn it into a renaissance?
Right.
And that's everything. That's not just your clothes, right?
Right,
That's
right.
like,
Your
this
social life, like your family life, a whole
everything.
career, whatever.
And, this age group, let's say I was thinking like somewhere 40 to 60,
Yeah.
is also when you're dealing with, childcare or empty nest syndrome, elder care or dying parents. It's the highest rate of divorce. It's the highest, it's sort of the ripest time for decreased earning potential in women and the highest rate of depression. And I thought, I don't want to do a sad sack story. I want to talk about the fact that we are at this stage of life being pressured in so many different ways, have so many responsibilities that we need to find a way back into the light. Like,
Yeah.
what does that relevance look like for us? And what happened to me? Well, I mean, first of all, I went out, I pitched the show to crickets. Like nobody. The only
Zero
response I
interest.
got was nobody will watch middle-aged women on television. And I was like, who are the Real Housewives?
They didn't talk to me, right? Exactly.
I was like, okay. And who do you think is watching television? But regardless of any of that, what it really made me feel, for the first time in my life in a very long time was like, oh, I'm not relevant anymore. And I had to fight my ego on that one a lot. I really did.
I'm sure.
To come out of, a phase of life where I was, pretty well known, to feel like I was sort of being forgotten is painful.
Yeah.
And I think you don't have to leave a television show or leave a career to start feeling that way in middle age, right? I hear a lot of women say to me, oh, nobody, cat calls me on the street anymore. And, nobody like looks at me
Right.
at parties or bars or whatever. And I understand that. We associate youth with attractiveness because, again, sociobiology, right? Youth is equated with fertility.
Right.
And fertility is the name of the
It's like
game.
growth, right?
Right.
It's
It's
like
like how we
rebirth.
keep
Right,
going.
exactly.
That's just Darwinism. And I think that translation, right? The same way I was saying we make a judgment about somebody in 3 seconds is the fight, flight, or freeze, mechanism in our brain. I think that there is a real moment in middle age where there is sort of this gateway that opens to what, losing youth feels like. And that gateway is really menopause. And while I was experiencing this sense of cultural irrelevancy and sort of not being, on the same playing field that I was used to, I realized that I was also going through a pretty difficult menopause experience. And I didn't know that's what it was. Right. I thought it was that I was upset about not knowing where my career was going, the spine surgery, my father getting sick and passing away. I could attribute any one issue that I was having to, I could explain it anything number of ways, right? Yeah, of course. Anything but. Anxiety, of course. What am I doing about my job? Depression, of course. I don't know. I just had a bad breakup. Right. I had surgery. I had this, I had that. Anything that was related to menopause. I had no idea. I thought menopause was optional. Right. Just PS, right? And I thought it happened to old people. Right. So here I am in my late 40s, starting to experience both physical and emotional changes while struggling to really understand my career identity. And then COVID happened. Right. And it was really a moment, before I get into just the idea that we all experienced a kind of intense, and I think are still experiencing an intense, kind of collective sense of loss and grief. I was really already experiencing my own. And the beginning of COVID, the very beginning, was relief, right? Before we knew how scary it was, for 2 weeks, I don't have to prove anything to anybody. I can sit here and do nothing. Right. And, it wound up being a lot longer than that and certainly a lot scarier. But there was this moment for me that the pandemic became my pause. It was my ability to push that button and sit with it for a while and think about it and let go of this kind of facade of ego and let go of what I thought I needed to do and think about not just what I wanted to do, but where was I going to serve a community best? Because for all the shit that people will say about what not to wear and, we were mean and we weren't nice and this and that and the other thing, I hold my head high that really our goals were to help people feel better. Right. Like we wanted their self-esteem and self-confidence, self-awareness to be exponentially higher when they left us. Right. And I would say, maybe 66% of the time that was true. But what was going to be the thing that I could do now that wasn't just about telling people what to wear, but still what was my kernel of truth, right? It was about self. It's been the through line of my career. What is it that I can do to help people with self-esteem, acceptance, all of those things in a new phase of life that maybe fashion isn't of tantamount importance to them because fashion was becoming less and less important to me. Right. And I started to think about this kind of bridge between the self-esteem of style and the self-esteem of wellness. And it would be one thing if we were talking about middle age and we were going to die at 60, right? I mean, then why bother? Go through menopause, and if you can't handle it, whatever. You're going to be dead soon anyway. But now, we have lifespans that are well into our 90s. Right. So this idea that middle age is a death knell not only is actually just a misrepresentation of the truth, it is really not looking at menopause as this gateway of possibility to the next version and the next iteration of a very long life in front of you. Right. And, it's one thing when we talk about this idea that there are more days behind you than there are in front of you. But if you're 45 to 50, you're looking at another, equal amount of time in front of you. Right. And that means that we need to start thinking about what does that look like? What does that look like for our careers? What does that look like for our relationships? What does that look like for our health? And for me, the more I didn't know about menopause, the more I had to learn about menopause, the more I realized that, we needed more information, more education from trusted sources that wasn't so dislocated and difficult to find, even a sixth of a second Google search was not kind of yielding all of the information that I felt was necessary for people to understand, nor was it yielding any product selections that could be helpful. There were some people like me who could not have taken hormones. There are some people who don't want to take hormones.
Right.
There are people who can't afford hormones or that kind of insurance.
Right.
What kind of over-the-counter products were helping to mitigate some of the circumstances and issues that you'll experience in menopause? And I thought, oh my God, this is something that I can do. This is something that 52% of the world's population will experience. And in 36 months, 1 billion people will be in menopause. That's the population of China. That's 12% of the world's population. And we don't have enough information or agency over our choices because we have not been given them by the medical establishment or the naturopathic establishment. You're supposed to kind of shut up and white knuckle it. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let anybody suffer
in silence,
Yeah, especially because I did. And if I'd known that many people of the population not only were going to experience it, but were experiencing what I was experiencing at the same time, I would have talked about it then.
Yeah.
I didn't because I felt alone, and that made me so ashamed.
Yeah. It's so interesting. I mean, I'm obviously not a woman, and I haven't gone through menopause, and I don't think I will. But, it's funny hearing you describe it as sort of this moment where you felt like sort of not knowingly, but didn't know that your life was like, changing in some way and you didn't know what was next and all this kind of stuff. It's funny because in so many ways, maybe just because of the culture I grew up in, there's so much like, I think gravitas and excitement about particularly being, if you're a woman, like reaching auntie status, right? Like you're like this sort of like elder stateswoman, like you sort of like your kids free, like you have like no filter and you're allowed to have no filter. You can have all this fun. And so it's so funny because I think you're so right though, right? That in many people, there is like this sort of like, not macabre, but this very melancholic sense of what it means to sort of age and move on.
No
Whereas
question.
in my own life, though, seeing my mom, my own aunts, like there is so much excitement and they're like fancy free and footloose. And they probably still had to get through some mental and emotional trials to get to that place. But on the other side, they are like living their best lives. Right?
I don't disagree at all. And I would actually say that that's why I see menopause
Of course,
as an opportunity.
right, exactly.
Right? This idea that I never sugarcoat anything. I would not sugarcoat menopause. I'm not like, you go, girl, you got this. It can be really hard. Not for everybody. It was for me. And I don't think I'm alone in that. But, we can only tell you that there are sort of a loosely, connected group of symptoms that you may or may not experience. There's a sort of time frame that you may or may not experience in them. We don't know which ones you'll get or how long or how severe some of them will be. We don't know whether you'll have early stage or late stage. There's a lot of kind of unanswered questions about menopause, but that's because nobody's bothered to do any research. But it's not just that. Menopause and aging are not the same thing.
Right.
And that's why it's really important for me to talk about both, right? Menopause is sort of like you're going along and you may experience a sense of loss. Like, I don't look like myself anymore. I don't feel like myself. I'm not the young version of me. And, even on What Not to Wear, I was always like, you have to let go of who you were to become who you are. And for me, with menopause, it was much more about, okay, this is making me feel like I'm not myself.
Right.
And I had to come to terms with that. I had to come to terms with what hormones were doing and wreaking havoc, with really my sense of identity. To come to terms with how you say goodbye to youth well and what it means to embrace being who I am, not who I'm going to become. Because I think, you talk about auntie status and footloose and fancy free. I do believe that. But I feel like we romanticize that at an even later stage when everybody thinks it's cute to be old, but nobody wants to age.
Right. They want to get there.
Right. They want to get there. They're happy to get there.
The process of getting there
But the process is what we have to learn to accept, embrace, and love. And, there is no... I say now, like, a lot of what I did in my youth was about, like, I will get to that someday. My someday is every day now.
Right.
Every day is the day that I should be doing what I put off for the last 40 years. Yeah. And to me, that's both exciting and terrifying.
Right.
And this idea that at the age of 52 and feeling like I'd already had 2 careers, I was just going to pivot, both because I did feel this, like, kind of impact in sense of like, wow, maybe I'm not going to get to go back to TV if really going back to TV means I already need 14 million followers on YouTube, right? It's a very different algorithm. And if, people are popular.
Right.
And I didn't feel that I had the wherewithal, the energy to want to make reels, videos, whatever, about like, Red and its tertiary complementary colors by Stacey London. Like, I just didn't want to do it. And so I thought, if I don't want to play that game, then I'm going to have to decide what it is that I am and what I believe in and what I care about outside the old public persona of me. And that's when I thought, I want something for myself.
Right.
I want something that serves a community of people that I understand and care about. But I want something that I own. Not that I'm working for somebody else, that belongs to me, that if I'm going to make mistakes, that if I burn it to the ground, it's on me. And if it's wonderful and successful, great, that's on me.
Right.
But I want something that is mine, that can't be taken away because a show gets canceled or because a casting director is looking for somebody 20 years younger. I want something that honors the age that I am now, what I have learned through age and experience, and I'm able to apply that to a new base of not just audience but consumer, and certainly create more sense of community around hard things, really hard things.
Absolutely.
And then I see people, young Gen Zers who are already so much more comfortable talking about their bodies and things like that in a way that, as I said before, I think Gen X will be the last generation of internalized shame about menopause, about aging, about anything.
Right.
So I see this like wonderful movement towards, my generation and younger generations where nobody's going to be embarrassed about menopause when Gen Z gets here, right? I don't believe that at all. What I think is that they'll be informed, they'll be knowledgeable, they'll come to state of menopause because they'll know us already.
Absolutely.
There won't be any like, I'm not sure who to talk to, or I'm embarrassed and I only want to buy things online.
Right.
That will go away. And how wonderful to be building something for the future. Of a population.
Yeah, I love that.
So it's not just about, the community of people my age experiencing this. And again, you don't have to get to menopause through age, which is why I try and separate it from aging, right? There's surgical, which could be radical hysterectomy or oophorectomy or endometrial surgery or PCOS. There's medical menopause.
You're a Vassar grad. You love acronyms. Keep going.
I do love acronyms. I don't always know what they stand for, so that's why I'm good at them.
Very Vassar.
And then, there's medical menopause, which usually is the result of cancer or cancer drug, chemo, things like that. And then there's gender non-binary menopause, which, frankly, I don't think anybody is talking about enough. I know a few experts who have really delved into this area. And my friend Heather Corinna wrote a book called What Fresh Hell Is This? That Tracy Ellis Ross was just reading on an episode of Blackish about perimenopause, which made me so happy.
You're normalizing that conversation. And a medium like Blackish is amazing. For a Black woman, too, it's amazing.
Well, also, my friend Omi Bernie Scott, who started the Black Girl's Guide to Menopause. Heather and Omi and I like to think of us as a little trio.
I love that.
They are remarkable individuals who have done so much work to make sure that menopause and this idea of aging is not some white woman, middle class, cisgender, heteronormative vanity project.
Right.
And I am in debt to them and everybody who came before them who realized, like, this is a physiological condition that has real physical ramifications and real health ramifications that we should be paying attention to. And this idea that we are attaching the menopause experience to getting old and somehow past your expiration date. It doesn't make any sense.
This is a really interesting point you're making. And I am curious, if your work, I should say, with State of Menopause, if you have found that there are any sort of other cultural understandings of menopause besides how we have learned to think about it in the West, right? Because one can imagine that because it is this transformative experience, right? In some cultures, you could imagine that this transformative experience actually welcomes you into a much more, again, like elder statesmen are a much more positive part of your life, at least culturally perceived so, right? And so
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if we can learn something from different cultures that actually think about this physiological thing as something that, again, is really the precursor to a great thing that should be celebrated and should be sort of, venerated in some ways that we haven't done that in the West.
Yes. Well, first of all, I would say America has issues, right? I mean, Americans in general, I would say, and some, Western European cultures. But I really do think that, strangely enough, everything sort of feeds into everything else. I think capitalism has a lot to do with,
patriarchy,
right, exactly, and the patriarchy, no question. When you look at, sort of matrilineal cultures, and when you look at cultures where you have real elder statesmen, right? When you think about like Japan, where there are lots of people over 100,
right?
I think there is a deeper appreciation for kind of what this gateway is, right? And I think it is our job, the people who are working in menopause today, to really kind of, flip the script on this idea of like being old is somehow awful, or even that sense of cultural irrelevance. We have the power to change that. Right. And I see, Gen Xers as glass ceiling breakers. I mean, there are just shards of glass everywhere.
Right.
And there's more to come. I think it was Forbes did an article called Gen X is Not Taking Aging Lying Down. We aren't boomers, and we aren't even, generations before that where it was sort of like we were comfortable retiring at 65 and golfing.
Right. I
don't think that that's what you're seeing here. And I think the longer our lifespans are becoming, the more we have to look at this time in the middle as the apex, as a really exciting third act in a 5-act play, instead of thinking this is somehow the end. This is the coda.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's really very exciting to think about this stage as a lot of what you were saying, this freedom, this unbelievable sense of reclamation of identity in a way that, a lot of people have never had the opportunity to experience.
Absolutely.
It's a real privilege, and it is a real privilege even after having the privilege of having children.
Right.
I speak to a lot of women who talk what I talk about as secondary grief, the idea that you can no longer have biological children after menopause. And look, there are women who have been infertile their entire lives, right? It's not that, suddenly they can't have children because of menopause. And certainly there were women who never wanted children, which was me. But did I have a moment of sadness, a sense of loss about not being able to procreate? Sure, because it's like anything, being able to do anything that you're no longer able to do.
Right.
But the one thing that really struck me is that somebody once said to me, menopause is sort of like the ultimate in infertility. And I was like, no, it's not. It's the end of fertility. And every natural process has an end.
Right.
And when we start talking about endings, really, not to get like all heady and existential, but really we're talking about death, right? I mean, everybody's got some weird hang up about dying.
Yeah.
And everybody's afraid of it, right? Sure, of course, like, you're on this planet to be here and experience things. We get very involved in our identities.
Yeah.
And the idea, the affront to that is that it doesn't last forever.
Right.
So any milestone that I think that reminds us of that in some way is
it's nerve-wracking.
It's nerve-wracking, but it's contemplative. It's a moment to think. I really believe that menopause is Mother Nature's sort of biological fail-safe to say, hey, slow your roll, take a second, take stock of where you've been, take stock of who you are, take stock of what you need to do to continue your health. Because in menopause, there are a lot of underlying issues that become much more significant as we age. Cardiac health, cognitive health, bone health. This is like the last stop on the train, okay, before you go careening if you are not taking care of yourself. So I'm like, if you're 50 years old and you're not strength training, get on it. You know what I mean? Like, this is the last chance you've got to get it right. And so I feel very strongly about all of those things. And to me, style is still an extension of all of this, right?
Of course.
So that's in my DNA. I'll never stop caring about that. I'll never stop having an opinion about it. And I certainly want to incorporate style as I grow this company,
right,
because it is about the fact that in menopause, we do lose our sense of identity and we lose our sense of agency over that identity.
Right.
What can we do to reclaim that power and also to reclaim what it feels like to be a person with female reproductive organs in a way that feels like we can reestablish ourselves outside of a
right,
patriarchal system, outside of system where fertility is
right,
prized above many other qualities. What does that look like if we're not trying to impress the opposite sex or any sex?
Anybody, right.
Anybody. What does it look like when we are trying to live our lives in this completely new way?
Yeah.
Where, scrolling on Instagram should not be the thing that makes you feel like you're not good enough, right? Because at this stage, you should not be defined by the terms of your past.
Right.
This is such a huge opportunity for self-expression. And, for me, I kind of fell into this. Menopause was something that affected me greatly. The idea that I wasn't going to enjoy aging, that I was somehow afraid of it,
right,
that I was already looking in the mirror and being like, oh, what am I going to do? Do I Botox? Is it a filler? What is it? Right? Even that was pissing me off because I was like, this is, everybody will tell you that aging is a privilege because the alternative is not being
not to
here.
Be alive, yeah.
But I think a lot of people are so afraid of aging, of the physical changes, of the diminished capacities that you experience. Like my knees are not what they used to be. All right, let's just be clear. They get so caught up with what they don't have or no longer possess that we really lose sight of what a privilege it is to have this kind of life experience and to be able to share that, in a multi-generational way.
Yeah, I hear you. That's such an inspiring story. And honestly, I do think it's something that many of our students have asked for, and then people around the world, students or not, I think can find so much power in and sort of understanding that things they go through themselves that are hurtful and painful and scary, right, can really also be the genesis of things that sort of allay their own personal sort of concerns and fears, but also can become springboards for communities of people to be able to latch onto and say, you know what, me too, not in the other sense, but me as well. I'm part of this community. I have these issues happening, and I love to find a way to, one, be in community folks who share that, but also to make them better, right, and enjoy my life and have a better quality of life overall, whatever that means for them.
And I think, to your point, exactly. Well, really, what we're talking about is when you share some sort of common language and experience. And again, as I said, I love the fact that our language is expanding in a way that in my lifetime has not happened. So I feel very fortunate to be living through this moment in history. But this idea of a common language, visual, expressive, whatever it is, that you can turn to somebody and say, and Brene Brown, I think, would be the first person to say, I was fortunate enough to be able to ask her when I was working on a project about style and psoriasis and psoriatic arthritis, which is what I was diagnosed with psoriasis when I was 3, and I was covered in scales for a lot of my childhood, from the neck down, just like covered in painfully dry, cracked, scaly skin. And I had the opportunity to work with people, whether or not they wanted to show their psioriasis or felt uncomfortable, wanted to cover it up.
They had experienced it.
And really just create a style guide for them. And I asked her, do you think that this is something that I should do? Do you think that this is something that I can do? Because I feel like people who have psoriasis in the psoriatic community, when I was young, there was none. I remember meeting a man who was in his 80s who had psoriasis, like really bad psoriasis on his knees. And I must have been 6 or 7 at the time. And I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I met another person with psoriasis, but he's going to die tomorrow.
He won't be around when I can talk about it.
I was like, who's he? I can't share I can't hang with him. And so, I was saying to her, like, this community can be very in a lot of pain. There's a lot of pain and shame around this kind of chronic illness, and people don't understand it, and they think it's contagious, and it, all of these things, and it can't kill you, but it makes you feel like you wish it could sometimes. And I was like, I don't know if this is something that I should take on. I don't know if I can help in the way that I want to. And she was so insightful. And she said, that she actually knew kind of the psoriatic community being kind of an infamously stubborn one to kind of get to open up and to talk about it and to show how, damaged their skin could be and things like that. And she was like, one, that's the reason to do it. The harder the community to reach, the better. But the fact is, the way that you're going to do this is by creating a language for this community, is by talking to them in a way that they understand. And again, I don't mean to talk about communities in terms of silos, right? We want to be as open and empathetic to all communities. But the fact that you can really identify with a community and it becomes your own is like any successful 12-step program you've ever seen in your life, right? It's like you've been in the same places, you felt the same things, you understand the hardships, you know what the successes and the joys feel like in a way that maybe somebody who's not as connected to that community will. And that's the difference, right, between sympathy and empathy. You want to be sympathetic to anybody's issues, but you can't be empathetic to everybody's unless you have had experience with it.
Absolutely.
And that, to me, is it's a remarkable thing that we're able to do now, not just through social.
No, of course.
But really also in the way that we are much more, I think, our nuanced level of conversation is extraordinary.
It is public conversation too, right? Because I think everyone has always been smart people, nuanced. But I think to your point, having this level of conversation that's so nuanced in the public sphere, I think is so inspiring and so impressive and makes people feel really safe, I think, in some ways. Now, we do have one segment before before we leave. But I have to ask, harkening back to an earlier comment you made about diversity and inclusion, because we talked so much recently about so many communities, right? Like the psoriasis community and people feeling like they're happy to be part of that community. And earlier you had said you don't like inclusion because it presupposes being included in something. But I'm curious to know how you sort of make sense of that in the context of this most recent conversation, right? Because obviously in some ways there is something to be included in, right? For some people, and they want that. So just let's make sense of that together.
Yes, and it's a great question, and also one that I should clarify, because when I think about inclusion, when people talk to me about diversity and inclusion, rightly or wrongly, my first instinct is about race. And when I think of, the BIPOC community, to me, when we talk about inclusion, we are talking about...
Oh, I see. I understand. You're concerned about assimilation. System. I understand.
Yes,
okay.
I am. I'm talking about assimilation.
It's very clear to me now.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
But when I think about being included in a community, I guess maybe when I'm talking about sort of psoriasis or age or anything like that, it's not just... It's still, inclusion is that funny word for me, right? Everybody wants to feel included. Don't get me wrong. But it's that I feel like communities build themselves, and that it isn't that there is a system in place that is a requirement for somebody to be included.
Not an in or an out sort of thing.
I like to think of it as being something that is like a moving, breathing, dialectical thing.
It's an organism.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for asking the clarifying question.
Of course. So our segment is really simple. It's nothing like what was on, what not to wear. But we are just doing a hot seat question for questions that came from our students. Because our students are super exciting. They're super excited. And they're very curious. How
can any of them know who I am? You're all babies.
You would be surprised.
I'm shocked.
Well, you know what? It's funny, though, because I, myself, am in a phase of life where I'm going back to rewatch things that came on that I never watched before. Wow. So, for example, I, believe it or not, I was alive, but definitely not cognizant when A Different World was on TV. So I've been watching A Different World. I finished that now, but I had over a couple of years ago, watched anew as an adult A Different World and just loved it. Similarly, people who know me know this to be true. I binge watched the original Dynasty 2 years ago, and a fashion person, right? So I absolutely fell in love, and so now I can't even watch the new one on Netflix.
Okay,
I'm like,
first of all,
no.
I didn't even know there was a new one on Netflix. That is sacrilege to me. But one thing I want to say about that is that my girlfriend and I have a little place upstate, and our favorite pizza place is called the Laundrette.
Okay.
And the Laundrette on Thursday nights has trivia night, and she and I hosted trivia night. And one of our multiple choice questions was, who was the costume designer on the original Dynasty?
I don't know the answer.
Oh my God!
I'm
Okay,
so
dude.
sorry.
It's Nolan Miller.
Okay, don't know who that is. But I will look them
Well,
up
you know
today.
who Bob Mackie is,
yes,
right?
yes,
okay,
of course.
So Bob
yes.
Mackie, Nolan Miller was a contemporary of Bob Mackie, and we made it multiple choice because I was like, nobody's going to get it except like the 3 people my age.
Right.
All 3 of them did get it,
Right.
by the way. But Bob Mackie and Nolan Miller both. I mean, the shoulder pads, the sequins, the
oh my
beading.
gosh.
Joan Collins is
Just a legend.
A
When I
legend.
tell you I am in love with Dynasty. So it's on my list now to watch Dallas because I have not
must.
watched Dallas. And my aunt has told me that I should watch this, not new show, but a current show called Yellowstone, which she feels is sort of like a more contemporary version of Dynasty. So
Interesting.
it's about like, I think these Montana oil fields, whatever. So it's very similar.
Western. I thought
it's
it was a
Western.
Western.
Yeah,
Yeah.
similar.
I mean, because everybody's told me about Yellowstone, and I'm like, I don't watch Westerns.
Right.
I'm
Oh,
sorry. I've just across the
oh
board.
my gosh, my mother loves Westerns. It is like her perfect ideal background noise. I swear to you, I will come downstairs and she will have on Bonanza, Gunsmoke.
How old is your mom? Do you mind?
61.
Oh, so
Yeah,
she's
yeah.
like close to me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
no, that
She
I just
loves it.
couldn't. I couldn't. I don't know. That never had enough fashion that I was interested in. Maybe that's what it was.
That's
I was
what
like,
it was.
petticoats like in dirt
Right,
does not
just
appeal to me.
wasn't your
Although
vibe.
I am loving the Gilded Age.
I have not watched it. Oh my
I mean,
gosh.
get
I
on
know.
it,
I'm so
babe.
behind, right?
Gilded
I'll
Age is
commit to it.
incredible.
I'll DM you when I've watched the first
Please,
episode.
because
Absolutely.
the costumes also in that
Are just to die for.
Remarkable.
I love it.
So good.
All right, let's get into our questions.
Yes, go.
5 quick questions, and then we'll be done. So the first question is, what is your favorite accessory or piece of clothing? It could either mean for you or like
Yes.
just in general. Like what piece of clothing do you just love to look at, examine, accessory, any of that?
Oh my God! I mean, these are not easy questions.
I
Let me just be
know.
clear, because it's like saying a favorite out of if I had a million
Right,
babies.
right.
I'm actually gonna go with the thing that I've been struggling with the most that
Okay.
I can't find that I want. I want the perfect 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and 2 inch belt, and that fits that has enough that I have a belt punch, hole puncher.
Right.
Used to keep it in my kit as a stylist. You have to have one of those. But I don't mind if I have to put more holes in something, but I want the belt to fit the belt loop of a pant or a jean correctly.
Yes.
And anything else makes me crazy. And right now, I have not been able to find ones that I really
Right.
like. So I would say that accessory is extremely important, and it's extremely important to find the right one, the right width. You need a black, a brown, a color, and an animal print.
Are you from Jersey?
Right? No, but this is my feeling, and that to me right now is the accessory that I can't stop thinking about because I can't find what I want.
Can I just tell you that I shouldn't say I love belts because I only probably have 3 or 4 and they're really generic. But a big pet peeve of mine is seeing, I guess men in particular, women it's a little bit different, but for men, when they have on suits that clearly have belt loops and there's no belt, I want to cry. It stands them having a suspender or something else, but if there's no suspenders but there are belt loops and there is no belt, I am livid. Yes. it is so pedestrian to me. I'm like, oh my God, who raised you? This is so
Also, who
crazy.
raised you?
Yes.
But also, you just used my favorite word of all time.
Which was
Pedestrian. Only as an adjective and never as a noun. Because
I
who
love
cares
that.
about
Right.
people who walk?
Right, exactly.
But pedestrian is by far my favorite.
Your
word.
favorite?
Oh,
Noted.
it's
I love that.
It's so cutting.
It's such a good word.
hilarious.
Right? I love words.
So good.
All right, question number 2 about words. How would you describe your style in one word? Not pedestrian, I'm sure.
No, I would say eclectic.
Okay.
And I say that because I don't have a particular style.
Okay.
You will never see me wear the same thing over and over and over again in the same way. Now, that's not to say, the outfit I'm wearing today, I've worn this outfit on more than one occasion.
Right.
But I feel like my style is constantly evolving. So I will go through phases where all I want to wear are girly, floaty, flippy, floofy
Right.
dresses. And then most of the time, I'm just wear the best trousers or the coolest
Right.
jeans,
Some
and keep it
overalls.
very, and not very overdone.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because for years on What Not to Wear, I was wearing pencil skirts and 5-inch heels
Yeah.
and floral tops. And for a long time, I wrote an article when I was 47 for Refinery 29 about feeling guilty that my style, my personal style, evolved past my what not to wear persona.
Right.
I thought people would be disappointed in
Right.
me. And when I was like, I want to wear leather jumpsuits. Like, I don't care about this
They're
floral
like, we don't
shit.
watch you for that.
Exactly. So, but it really, and it turned into this whole thing about how I dressed on what not to wear because we knew who our audience was, right? And we were trying to appeal to a large
certain-
base
yeah.
of people.
It's TV.
So it was like very feminized and
Yeah.
very sexualized in a lot of ways, super high heels, super tight skirts, that I don't feel the need to do anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't feel, it's not that I don't approve of it for other people, but for me, that sense of objectification or that sense of feeling some sort of objectification has absolutely nothing to do with where I am in my life.
Yeah.
And I don't need to prove anything in that way.
Right.
So I feel much more comfortable now with more casual clothing. I love things that fit,
Of
but
course.
I started wearing power suits, like in 3-piece,
Right.
custom-made
Right.
suits, because it made me feel as powerful as the latex catsuit a dominatrix would wear.
Right. Love that. Question number 3. Who do you think is an underrated or up-and-coming fashion icon or designer?
Oh, that's really hard for me.
Yeah.
That's really hard for me. There are so many incredibly talented designers. That's really hard. That's really
Yeah,
hard for
I
me.
can imagine.
There is, well, the funny thing is the two things that come to mind for me are accessories. They're both jewelers.
Okay.
One named Bree Nichols,
Okay.
who Bree Nichols / Nature is the name of her company, and she is a female founder, jewelry designer, does some of the most beautiful kind of organic shapes. She makes them in brass, so they're very affordable, but you can have them made in silver or
Right.
gold. She has a collection, but she also makes things to order.
Right.
And I really admire her aesthetic. It really is very natural. It's
Yeah.
like very much based in nature
Right.
and quite stunning. And then there is a designer named Suet Siam, who has a young jewelry designer who has done the most incredible charms of Malcolm X and Harriet Tubman.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful medallions, beautiful Nefertiti and Cleopatra,
Yeah.
and things that just really are so striking
Right.
and so detailed and beautiful. And their work is something that I truly admire.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. 2 more questions. So since you do own a brand that sells wellness products, I have to ask, how many steps are in your skincare routine?
Well, it depends on the day.
Okay.
But yes, there are a lot of steps. No, my average steps, right, will always include, I have a cooling spray in
Yep.
my state of menopause, which is great because I'm actually overheating right now. I'm
Yeah,
in
I'm
the middle of a
sorry.
hot flash, and I honestly don't have my cooling spray in my bag, which is a sacrilege on my part. But I use it as a toner because for anybody, young, old, I don't care, whatever age you are, the most important thing about skin is you need to keep it hydrated.
Right.
Obviously, when you're younger and you have more collagen, that's a lot easier.
Right.
Skin is hydrated more easily. But you always want to wet your skin before applying anything to it, whether that's water or, in my case, I like using the cooling spray as a toner. It has a
Right.
little bit of pH balance to
Okay.
it, so it just opens your pores. That's
Right.
really what it does.
Right.
Then I use our face oil, State of Menopause face oil, which it smells like lavender. And literally, not to brag, okay, I'm bragging. There are so many expensive face oils out there, and our face oil, for me, this was a very important thing if I was going to make any kind of product. It has to be democratized.
Right.
It has to be affordable. And if you cannot make it affordable, then you're not making it for everybody.
Right.
So when you see some of the prices of face oils out there, and I
Oh my
look at
gosh.
our face oil, I'm so proud
Right.
of what we've been able to do, which is also, originally we devised these products for mature skin,
Right.
skin that was being affected by hormonal fluctuation.
Right.
And the amount of people who are not in menopause who use my product, it's pretty crazy.
Right.
And then I use the cooling gel
Okay.
because I have night sweats and hot flashes, and I don't like anything goopy on me.
Yeah.
This our cooling facial gel it is full of hydration, and yet at the same time absorbs
It
into
absorbs
the
well,
skin,
yeah.
so you never feel sticky.
Love that.
And that's what I do every day. When it gets real cold and real dry, then I will, on top sometimes of the facial gel, I'll put our cream, which is much, much heavier in terms of hydration. Or sometimes I just use the cream instead of the gel.
Got it.
And it really does depend. You know, that for me is the everyday, morning and night.
Right.
But then, you know, at least twice a week I use a hydrogel face mask because that's just me being nice to myself.
Self-care.
I'm like, I believe in self-care. I believe in I know the self-care as a term is getting so worn out.
Yes,
Wellness is getting so worn out. But unfortunately, those are the only words we have right now.
Right.
To really think about, again, reclamation and ritual around being who we are at this stage of life, or any stage of life, right? What does that mean to you? What does that look like when you are taking 20 minutes to put a mask on and do something that is just for you?
Right.
And really, it's something that I've had to learn to do becoming the founder of a startup.
Yeah.
You know, that's what 20-somethings are heads of startups, right? One, I wanted to prove to myself I acquired the company that it really never was launched. And I was a beta tester for it, and then they were going to sunset it. So I acquired it. And there were a couple of things. I mean, one, it was that I wanted to do something for a community that I was clearly a part of. Right. But it was also that I have not done anything this hard ever. All of my jobs, my entire life, have come to me, and I don't say that like I'm bragging. I am so fortunate and lucky. I was lucky in getting them, but I had to work real hard, right? After that, I mean, you know, got me in the door. I managed to get a lot of wonderful jobs, but I had to work really hard at them. This is the first time that I have had to challenge myself with no skill set that I am actually good at. I did not know anything about building a site. I did not know very much about e-com or direct to consumer. I did not know anything about writing code or inventory, reconciliation. I didn't know anything about business. I mean, honestly, like I didn't go to business school, but nobody is born a CEO. And I was like, this can't be, I am not going to go apply to business school to figure out whether I can do this. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it because I have a passion and a vision for what this needs to be. And that's why I wanted to be a founder. And I also wanted to say, look what I did.
Of course.
At 51, I changed my life. I changed my career. I didn't wait around for somebody to offer me something. I actually, used my own initiative out of inertia. I had been staying at rest and I needed to get into motion, and I had to force myself into that. But I also wanted to stand as hopefully an example for somebody else who gets to this age and thinks,
what's next?
What's next for me? What can I do that I didn't think was possible?
Love that. Last question. Across all artistic mediums, have you or do you ever reach creative blocks, and how do you get around them?
Yes. And I would say mostly in my writing. I write a lot. I've written 2 books, and I am about to embark on my 3rd. And I write articles a lot. And I do what I tend to do when I cannot get something right, and I am a stickler about the way that I speak. I want my voice to be very precise. I want it to sound like me consistently, right? So I try very hard in the way that I write. Also, P.S., I learned to write here at Vassar.
Of course.
But I do something else that's either artistic or mindless. So I love to paint. I am a terrible painter. I mean, I don't know. Maybe someday somebody will be like, wow, decades, maybe centuries after I'm dead, somebody will be like, she was really like a female Picasso. I'm not counting on it. But anyway, I will paint if I can't write. It's just something to get
the energy
going and to flow and to have your brain work in a different way. My girlfriend says to me all the time, you are way too much in your head and you're never in your body. And so one of the things that I've been trying to think about this year, because I sit a lot now as a CEO, I'm just on phone calls or Zoom calls and just in front of my computer every second of every day, is finding ways to block out 20-minute spurts where instead of reading or staring at a screen or trying to write or even painting, I just walk, that I do something physical because I've lost touch with my body in a way that I feel like I've actually experienced even when I was on What Not to Wear. You have to kind of dissociate from your physical self to stand in 5-inch heels for 12 hours, right? Why I never thought to put on bunny slippers, it's unclear. But after years of heels, it's like, no wonder I had spine surgery. Like I didn't pay attention to keeping my body strong. I was so busy, you know, sort of seeking opportunity and thinking, oh, the window of opportunity is going to close. I've got to take everything. I've got to say yes to everything. You do that for long enough, you're going to burn out.
Yeah.
And that's when, you know, saying yes to everything, which a lot of people will tell you to do when you're young, doesn't become as important as saying no.
Absolutely.
There's always push and
some
pull.
Some power in some saying no.
Absolutely.
I love that. Oh my
Absolutely.
gosh.
And I think the ability to say no comes from true self-knowledge. And self-knowledge definitely comes with age and experience.
Well, thank you for some beautiful closing words and for some wonderful answers nonetheless.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So this is Conversations at the Salt Line, and, you know, salt lines are where edges meet and where perspectives collide. And so I've heard a few in this conversation. I've heard insecurity and self-empowerment, fashion, aging, and menopause. So thank you for having some wonderful conversations on some tight edges, and look forward to having you again here sometime soon.
I would love to come back. Thank you.
Thanks, Stacey.